Before we start this podcast, I want to definitely remind you of a sponsor for Fresh of the Word, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest. In the world of wrestling, where there's hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads, don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. So if you'd like to discuss a possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or even Zubaz, then drop them a line at 20by20apparel.com. That's the number 20x, the number 20apparel.com. And also check out their enamel pin line. It's super cool.
Fresh is the word.
Welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And like always, we have the freshest of guests for you. The guest for this episode is Rick Spears, author of the YA graphic novel My Riot, recently released via Oni Press. My Riot, created along with the artist Emmett Helen, is a Riot Girl story set in 1981 with its main character, a teenager named Val, struggling with finding her own identity while facing pressures of conformity. It's a story about how the countercultures of our society have been very influential to the people that we would become later on. Rick Spears has written numerous graphic novels and comics, including Teenagers from Mars, Black Metal, and Auteur. He's also written for films, television, and directed a handful of award-winning short films. During our conversation, we talked about the making of My Riot, keeping the authenticity of the Riot Girl movement in this story, and how this story relates to the culture now, and why he wanted to tell this story in a specific way, which we'll get into. Before we get into this interview with Rick Spears, I'm pushing out this episode a little early this week because of Thanksgiving, but also this week is the 5-year anniversary of Fresh of the Word. I've said this before in previous intros that I was going to do something special, but I've literally been so exhausted by life with this pandemic and the election and everything that I'm like, I just didn't want to do anything else. I was just like, I'm pretty much done recording interviews for both my podcasts for the rest of the year. Then I'm going to try to take February or December off and come back after the new year. I might take a longer, hiatus with Fresh is the Word, but I'm definitely coming back after, in the new year with Renaissance Soul. But it's 5 years. I've been doing this podcast for 5 years. Right now has been the longest regular streak I've been on since about episode 70. I've pretty much not stopped. So I think I might I think I might need to take a break for a little bit just to, freshen the word a little bit, But it's 5 years. Thank you to everybody that's been listening, everybody who's been on the show, all the publicists and managers that hooked me up with the people that they're representing. Anybody else who's recommended things and people for the podcast. It's been, a good time. I've definitely used this podcast to, get through my own shit, and I continually will. Definitely want to put more of myself into it, and hopefully my stories will help somebody, basis, But 5 years. We're at this is episode 236. 236 of these episodes. Man, wow. But it's been fun. It started as me wanting to just do podcast about music and wrestling because that's all I was into at the time 5 years ago. And then like I threw some MMA in there and brought my boy V Styles in to talk about that. But then I realized I didn't want to be a part of like the wrestling or MMA like press culture. Like I'd rather just be fans of that stuff, you know. I wouldn't mind having like, wrestlers or MMA people on still, but I'm not gonna try to be a wrestling or MMA podcast. So, after I took a break, started going to therapy and stuff like that. When I came back, around episode 70, you know, I I was starting to get more into the comic books and the convention circuit. So I had a lot of people come in from that, which those people really like those type of people really helped me in regards to finding my own identity in life and stuff. There, I started interviewing, sex educators and stuff like that, authors and stuff like that, and that really helped with, the discussions that need to be made about sexuality and gender and race and abuse and stuff like that. So like I feel like I've been, there's been some important work that's been done on this, podcast. And then I have like the really stupid, episodes where I'm like goofing off with like, Alazualu and stuff like that. I want to have a balance, I want to have, it's because that's what's going on in my life, Part of me is like goofy stuff, and then there's other things where I like, hey, let's talk about some serious things. But let's have fun doing it, Like even if we're talking about some serious things, I want to have fun doing it. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about myself doing this podcast. It's been cool to have my own thing. I want to be able to branch off and do other things with it. I definitely want to be able to promote it more. I definitely want to like be able to have more attention to my other podcast, Renaissance Soul, which is about Detroit music history. After the new year, I'm gonna go in a little bit of a more promo mode after the new year, and so if anybody's listening to this, and you can do a write up on a website, or I can be on your podcast, just holler at me. My you can just email me at djkfresh@gmail.com. But thank you for everybody who's been listening for the past 5 years. That's all I really want to say. At this point, I didn't want to. Like I said, I was just too exhausted to make a big deal about it. So I just really want to thank everybody. So after a word from our sponsor, we'll get into this interview with Rick Spears, and we'll talk about My Riot.
Pretty good, pretty good. How are you?
Doing all right, doing all right. I really dig My Riot. It's really cool. That's like my type of a graphic novel because I'm like a music guy.
Yeah, right
And
on.
anytime you can just throw like some music in there, then like I'm cool. I can really connect to it, and I really connect with this. It kind of there's a lot of things that it kind of intersects in between, like this girl kind of figuring herself out, having this really stressful being a ballerina and going through all the stress of that while figuring out these other things that a young lady goes through. So kind of like talk about the idea of telling this story.
Well, let me see. Well, you mentioned Teenagers from Mars, and that was my first comic book and graphic novel, and and that one, just real quick, was based on there was this guy Mike Diana who did this. It's more of a zine than a comic, really, but had comics in it called Boiled Angel, and he got in trouble. He got arrested for doing his book, and they took it away from him, and he got prosecuted and convicted of obscenity, and and part of his conviction was that he wasn't allowed to draw anymore. He wasn't allowed to make comics. And I was in college at the time and a big comic book fan. And I just thought that was crazy. I
Yeah.
just thought that was like, how is that possible? How someone's doing comic books, and he was the first artist of all art, that was convicted of obscenity for comics. It just seemed like, I don't know, that comics were the, like, they just didn't have any respect in the world at all, and in the art world as well. And this was, this was a little bit before all the Marvel movies and everything.
Right.
But yeah, and so I did that book, and in that book, the main character Macon, he sort of like he sort of forms like a it's not a real terrorist organization, but sort of puts on that sort of almost guise and goes to get his comic book back by force, if necessary. And I thought that was a fun idea and sort of wild, and I thought that was cool. And then so a few years later, I was reading an interview with Kathleen Hanna, who's in Bikini Kill.
Yeah.
And she was, I think it was in Punk Planet, and she was talking about like being radical and being revolutionary and ways to do that, and that like the sort of like the guy way, like the way guys sort of fall into sort of macho way to do that was to like grab a gun and go, take what's yours. And I totally related to that. That's exactly what I had done in Teenagers from Mars. And she made the point that, as soon as you do that, you're like a crazy person, you're like, you're going to get killed, you're going to get shot, you're going to get arrested or whatever, and it's like a fantasy, right? I mean, I don't know these days.
Oh, like it's weird. But reality, man, what the hell?
Yeah, I just thought about that a lot, that like, and so she talked about how to be sort of sustainable ways to be radical. Yeah, so I was reading this article, and she was talking about these sort of sustainable ways of being radical, and it was things like like making zines, and doing music and stuff like that, and that was a way to get your voice out there and to be heard, and to talk about important things and political things, but in a way that was it wasn't just shouting at nothing, you know what I mean? It was you're doing a thing, you're making art, and that was a way that people would hear you, but it was also the kind of thing that it's not running around acting like a crazy person.
Right.
So that really, I don't know, it really spoke to me, and I felt that I'd sort of done the first version with Teenagers from Mars, that if that would have been a real story, like, or if that had really happened, it would have probably ended up a different way for Macon. So anyway, I was sort of interested in sort of doing something again that was sort of a political, sort of radical story about how a young person, a teenager, could sort of have that in their life, but in a practical, sustainable way, that you didn't have to give it up too. Like if you got older and got a job or whatever, you could still be political and do these things, that it wasn't just a phase or anything like that. And so that was sort of the beginning of the idea. And I think probably because it was the Kathleen Hanna interview, I started thinking, I saw Bikini Kill way back in the day. And it was one of those shows that was just so, it was so good. It was so strong. They were amazing. And it always sort of stuck with me. I've seen a lot of bands over the years, and some of them, they just really stick with you. And so I was just thinking about that a lot. And so that's when I started to put the book together, start writing the script.
What was yours? Like, you kind of mentioned it before. What was sort of like your background with consuming music? When did you start? What were you listening to? What kind of shows were you going to?
Yeah, well, I mean, music's just always been a part of my life, and when I was in high school, like, music was really how people sort of displayed their identity, I think, so it was like, you meet somebody, one of the early questions, well, what do you listen to, man?
Right.
And if they mentioned bands that you liked, you were like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, like I think we'll probably get along, and then my favorite is when they mentioned some bands that you liked, and then some stuff you never even heard of, and you're like, all right, I gotta find out what this is. But I listened to a lot of stuff. I mean, punk rock and alternative, metal, progressive, electronic. I mean, I'm sort of all over the place a little bit.
Yep,
but
same with me.
but I mean, it's if it's good, if it if you feel it, if it moves you, then that's what works for me. Now, I listen to music a lot when I'm writing, and so now I've gotten a lot more into like soundtracks, and sort of like ambient music and electronic music without the lyrics can mess me up a little bit.
Right.
So I much more into that kind of thing these days, like soundscapes and stuff like that. But yeah. How
Was
about
there?
you? What do you listen to?
Oh, I'm my roots are kind of like into is like the hip hop scenes and everything. But even when I was a little kid, like the first music artist that I ever loved was Jimi Hendrix, and that was just he was like my first inspiration, my first teacher. I learned a lot about humanity even as like a little 7-year old through him, and I was listening to stuff like Def Leppard was my favorite band as a kid, still is my favorite band of all time.
Yeah.
But then after that, when I was a teenager, like in the '90s, I was really into hip hop, huge in that. And then as I got older, a little bit of everything. I like a lot of metal stuff, some punk stuff, some hardcore, like just pop music and stuff like that. I've met a little bit of everything, but I'm like really into discovering new music all the time because I've been a music writer, like journalist. I do a podcast like this, where I'm talking to people. I do a Detroit music history podcast also called Renaissance Soul because I've always been a part of the Detroit music scene here. So it's a little bit of everything, but I still like to I like discovering like more obscure stuff all the time, and being having my dollars go straight to the artist and know that my $10 will really help out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, man, yeah, I hear you. And I haven't, I had a kid, and I
Yeah.
hadn't been going to show. I used to go all the time, right? And then you just start working the job and doing the doing the family thing, and I hadn't been to a show for like, I mean, I can't even remember. It was a long time.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I was really getting into soundtrack stuff, right? And I also I like weird movies, man.
Right.
So I'm really into like horror movies and all kinds of stuff from Europe and all over, and like this guy Dario Argento, if you know him, he does all kinds of these amazing Italian horror films, and he worked with this band called Goblin, that did the soundtracks for like a ton of his movies. I mean, and it's really this really weird sort of proggy, just sort of wild soundtrack stuff. And they were coming. They were going to come to. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and they were going to play in DC. And there's like two different Goblin bands. There's one that's like most of Goblin, and then there's Claudio's Goblin's like an offshoot that's Claudio and some other people.
Right.
But this was like the core group. This was like everybody but Claudio, and they were coming to the 930 Club up in DC, and Zombie was opening for them. And I hadn't been to a show in so long, and I went up there. I was like, I gotta go. Like, you know what I mean? These guys are old.
Right.
They don't tour. I don't think they've toured. Claudio tours a bunch, but that other Goblin version, I don't think they've come back since, And I was like, this might be it. This might be my only chance. And so I went up there and saw them, and it just reminded me like live music, and it was so loud and just it was wonderful. So I've been trying to go to more shows.
Right. I think like I mean, before, when you start like having a family, it's hard to go out to shows and whatnot. But I think with, there's kind of like this kind of full circle that happens. It's like, you go that 15 years or so, 15, 20 years of raising kids. And then later on, if you still have the energy, you might like start doing it again once your kids are, older and stuff. or even do it
Definitely.
with your kids, like, and then like,
Well, yeah.
and that's more acceptable than it was maybe in a previous generation or two, whereas like, you had that idea of like, okay, I'm a family man now, time to put away childish things and stuff like that.
Right.
But now it's like a lot more acceptable, and even with like technology and stuff like that, having the internet access to things, you can still be in touch with a lot of the things that, you know, the stuff that you grew up with, and still like to a certain extent, find things that might excite you.
Definitely. Definitely. And it's also like another. It's like another reason why I did the My Riot book. That I wanted at some point my kid to like I could by the time they're a teenager I'm gonna be this weird old dude, and I was like, here you can read this. I used to be cool, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was kind of cool. I did this.
Yeah,
I did these books.
I know what's going on, right? Uh,
Like, when you were putting together this story, was there anything else that you used for just like informational purposes to kind of make sure that everything was authentic?
well, yeah, definitely. I did a lot of research. I mean, obviously listen to bands. Listen to the music and look at the lyrics and stuff like that of all the Riot Grrrl bands, and then reading. I tried to read as much as I could get my hands on, and it's great with the internet. There's lots of interviews and reviews and stuff like that you can find online and read up about the bands and sort of the principal people that were making this music. But then also, I mean, like I was in a band for a hot second. Not very good. Had one show, so like I had sort of that sort of to pull from, my own experiences. And my wife had been in ballet. And so that's where like a lot of that had come from, because she had told me sort of stories about her experience in that field. And so that gave me that side of it. And then just trying to work it all together into a narrative that sort of made sense. So, and like I said at the time, like there's going to be a father as we were working on it, and so that like the parents, it was always just going to be about Val and her friends, but as I was like thinking more about becoming a parent, her parents became larger characters than I sort of had imagined initially, especially her mom, like her relationship with her mom, and her mom, having to sort of let her go,
Yeah.
and let her go off and be her own herself, and that was sort of a surprise when I was working on it, but I really like it. I always say, when I talk to people about writing, that, these stories, though, a lot of times you put your life in it, whatever you're going through at the time when you're working on it, and you might not even realize it, but it's just there. It's just in the mix. And then later when you go back and look at them, they sort of take me back to my life when I was writing them, and I'll see little, I mean, some of it people might notice, but mostly probably not, but I'll be like, oh man, that was from, this was from that event, or, somebody had said something. And so that got put in, but, so that's always kind of fun.
Aside from like the ballet stories, when you were doing like the research for the other parts of these characters, what were some of the common themes that you would sort of get out of like the interviews that you'd read and listen to, and everything that you were doing in regards to prepping for this story that you would end up like putting in this graphic novel?
Well, I mean, a lot of it was just, well, I guess, the biggest thing that I took away from it was the sort of DIY, the do-it-yourself sort of lifestyle, frankly,
Yeah.
and that really, I mean, especially in Riot Grrrl, because it was outside, for the most part, it was outside of the mainstream music industry, and it was, girls doing punk rock, and women doing rock and roll and stuff, and a lot of people sort of didn't really know what to do with it or how to think about it, and so they were doing their own records, books and putting them out, and their own tapes, and doing their own zines, and talking about the things that they wanted to talk about. And that I really wanted to, I mean, sort of do that myself, because I've done that a lot, throughout my career. Like Teenagers from Mars was just totally self-published. I self-published a lot of my own work. And then, but then also not just putting that sort of spirit into the book, but also sort of talking about how to do it, so we show them recording a tape, and learning about silk screening to make t-shirts. I mean, that's, when you're in a band, like t-shirts are like one of the biggest ways to make money, because you can do different shirts for different tours and, whatever. And, someone might buy your record that you put all the work into, but then you can sell them a t-shirt for like $20 or 3 t-shirts, you know what I mean? And those are sort of easier to produce. Usually you just need an image and silk screen.
Yeah.
And you can really fund a tour that way. And so we sort of talk about that. We show that a little bit. And then just how these women were helping each other out. And then also the zines come up. We talk about doing zines and stuff. And there's a scene in there where they sort of make their own tape, and they're dubbing them, they're just dubbing them themselves with a dual cassette thing. And they talk about, does this mean we're published, musicians now? And it's like, yeah, it doesn't have to be some other company that does it.
Right.
It's like you could do it yourself. And someone told me a long time ago, they're like, if you can do it yourself, no one can take that away from you.
Yeah.
If someone's like, no, we don't want to publish your book, or no, we don't want to put out your record. If you can put it out yourself, then that's not, then it's not a no. It doesn't stop you. You can go ahead and do it anyway. So that was one of the big themes.
How does sort of like this punk rock, this riot girl culture, parallel like your just average young woman trying to just figure themselves out? What can a young girl learn from that culture?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what's, we get into in the book a lot. I talked a lot with my editor, beforehand, that I didn't want to make a book just about a really radical person becoming more radical. I wanted kind of a middle of the road sort of every woman.
Yeah.
Sort of, I mean, I'm not sure what the right word is, but not boring, but, just sort of an average woman, and then see how she takes this journey. So it's not like you don't need something already. Some people, they don't do something because they feel. I remember I wanted to go to film school when I got out of high school. I wanted to go to film school, and I looked at it was NYU, and they required a portfolio. Well, I didn't have a portfolio. I was a kid, and no one tells you that nobody really has a portfolio. You just sort of the year before, the summer before, you do what you can, and that becomes your portfolio, But because I didn't have a portfolio, I didn't even apply. And I always feel like that was a big mistake. I wish my guidance counselor or somebody would have told me no. If this is what you want to do, don't let this stop you, So I wanted Val to be that pretty much anybody could pick up that book and feel a little bit like Val, that it wasn't like she was already super cool and there'd be some barrier, to being like her. But I wanted her kind of sort of average, and then we see how she takes that journey. And so, that would be, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, but
no, I feel what you're saying.
There was some point.
No, and then as you'll see, she goes through this journey, and in the end, it's just you see that, and a lot of times in this culture that just that regular way where people kind of go different places, and but that time is just still with her and makes her the person that she is.
Well, yeah, and I had really strong feelings about the sort of end of the book. I don't give anything away, but I didn't want her to just end up with a guy, that made it all whatever. I wanted her to be able to stand on her own 2 feet and just be herself and be able to carry these things, because I think of teenagers, it's this kind of magical time, right? Like you're not an adult yet. You don't have the sort of full weight and responsibility of being an adult. Um, and you're not a kid anymore. You're not a child. You know, you're able to sort of access the larger world on your own, but you still have a bit of that like magical belief, you know, that anything's possible, that you still have that, I'm not sure what it is, but that childlike quality that a lot of adults, you know, they lose, and sometimes they lose it pretty fast. It's so depressing to me. And so I was, you know, I wanted to show someone hang on to some of that, you know. So when she reaches, you know, the end of the book, we see her, you know, sort of as an adult, and she's in the world, but she's in it on her terms, and she's living the way she wants to live. And that was always real important to me.
You know, for My Riot, you know, how did you, you know, what was the sort of like the game plan in regards to the art to fit this situation, to fit this story? You know, Emmett Hallen's the ones that is the artist on this book. Like, what was sort of the, you know, how did you want the art to complement the story?
That's a good question. You know, a lot of my other books, I had always found the artist myself, and I was trying to change it up and do something a little different, and do something different with the art. And so I talked to Oni, the publisher, Oni Press, about, you know, hey, let's try to find somebody. Let's try to find someone, you know, new and young and fresh and exciting. And they, I believe, if I understand correctly, Emmett was at Heroes Con, which is in North Carolina and Charlotte. And it's a really good con. It's always one of my favorite ones. And Oni was there that year, and they had like a portfolio review, you know, so I don't know, you know, what you or your audience knows about like comics and stuff, but you know, as a writer, you can, you know, write a pitch and write a story and sort of, you know, meet editors and sort of pitch your material. But for artists, it's a little different, because you have to, like, the writer gets hired for the work that they're doing, that they're pitching. But the art, you sort of have to make a calculation. You have to say, okay, this is the work they've done before, you know, and then you have to sort of imagine what they'll be able to do on this story, and sort of, you know, because you hire them and then they get to work, you know.
Yeah.
So you're hiring them sort of more on their past work. Anyway, Emmett did they did a portfolio review with Oni Press, and they really hit it off, and everybody liked their work. And Oni brought the M's stuff to me, and I checked it out, and I was like, yeah, this is fun, you know. And so Emmett and I started talking a bunch about it, and I would send them what am I thinking? Reference material. I don't know why that word was hard, but like, you know, so like lots of pictures of like from Riot Grrrl shows, and, you know, the 90s and stuff like that. And then M did a bunch of samples, and they were great. They were so good, you know. And they were doing stuff where when they got into the music scenes, it was sort of more rough, especially when the songs were rough.
Yeah.
You know, and then there are other places where the art sort of tightened up more as other things tightened up. And I love that idea of not just drawing what's on the script, you know, but really thinking about it and interpreting both the dramatic content, but also the sort of meaning, you know, behind it. And Emmett just, I'm very fortunate. I was very, very lucky to meet them and work with them. And yeah, I'm super, super happy with the art.
Yeah, I love the use of color throughout the story. You know, depending on like the mood or, you know, what's going on, the scene. It really kind of brings out, you know, the deep meaning of it.
Yeah, again, all Emmett. I mean, we sort of talk about it with the editor, and they just had a bunch of ideas, and you know, I got to just sit back and watch sort of work out so well.
You know, what do you hope, you know, people get out of reading My Riot?
I mean, I hope, well, first and foremost, I just hope that it's a good story. You know, that people can just take a break from the wider world, and just, I mean, reading is just one of my absolute favorite things. And just to sort of sit there and go into the story and sort of get lost in it. And, my hope is also that, that it doesn't feel like there's a story sort of over here on one side and then art on the other side, but that it all comes together and it's sort of seamless, almost like it was made by one person. And that it's just a believable a world that you enter for a little bit, and then when it's over, maybe you hope there'd be more. You can go back. And if you grew up in the '90s or just thought the '90s were cool or whatever, that you sort of get to taste that again. I feel really good that we got that sort of vibe right. Um, and then also, bring some radicalness into your life, and maybe, everybody does something, you know what I mean? If it's the job or the hobby or whatever. But I think, most people, um, you know, either do some sort of art like music or drawing or painting or something like that,
Yeah.
even if it's, I mean, you don't have to write songs always, but just playing the guitar or something. Um, yeah. So
Is there, like, being that we're in this pandemic right now, we're also, you know, in the middle of another civil rights movement with Black Lives Matter, and
yeah,
that's fanned the flames into other, civil rights regards, along with their, things going on in the government in regards
yeah,
to women's issues and their reproductive rights. There's a lot of things that in the story, she's going through in regards to, her weight, her look,
yeah.
being, growing up. What, how, is there any deeper meaning now with this story, as a lot of those, social issues are really, intense these days?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's sort of like the books become very timely. And I mean, you just look around and it's so frustrating, and so it's just sort of out of control, and you're like, man, how did we get here? Um, and but I still fall back on, what I had said sort of at the beginning about, how are you political and how are you sort of radical in your life in a sustainable way? Because, even after the election, um, hopefully we get a new president, but that doesn't mean any of these issues are going away.
Right.
It's just going to be that dude will be put to the side. But I mean, they're very big issues, um, to deal with, and if everyone just shouts at each other and wants to, like, you know shake guns at each other or even shoot at each other, god forbid, it's not going to get better, it's only going to get worse. you know and I think that, like, you you know we need to be able to communicate, and we need to be able to talk about this stuff. I think music and comics and art is a great way to sort of get. I mean, you look at in the '60s, the music was such a big part
Yeah.
of what they were doing then, because, if someone's like, man, I don't want to listen to you, I don't want to listen to what you say because I disagree with you politically, but if you put it inside a catchy song, sometimes, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, so it's sort of surprisingly simple that all of a sudden the other person's defenses come down, right? Because you've got a catchy tune, and the next thing you know, they're hearing these words that they couldn't hear before, and then maybe they go, oh, well, wait a minute, man, like, I see what they're saying. You know what I mean? And, like, and also, songs, they speak truth to power. I think, I put it in the book. Someone, I think it was Joe Strummer from the class, said, all you need to write a good song is three chords and the truth. And I think the truth is the important part. We need to get back to sort of honesty and truth, not lies. So, I mean, and there's literally, people are rioting now, this is there's a lot of work to be done. If I'd known what would be going on, I would have done the book a little differently, I think. I probably would have spoken more about race. I mean, I would definitely have spoken more about race in it. That's the one thing, if I could change, I would have done more on that side. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of a crazy time, and I think, I don't know. I wish I had the answer, I tell you. But I think that you just got to keep the pressure on, keep speaking the truth, especially to power, to hold people accountable, and to vote, for crying out loud.
Right. When you were writing this book, did you have anybody sort of to turn to look over, what you had written, to make sure that you're not putting too much of like a man's point of view into these women characters?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a big, big, big concern, because, and I just, there's representation, which is so important, but then there's also appropriation.
Yeah.
And I was, and I don't really know. I don't know where exactly I came down through there. I was trying to thread the needle of do a strong book, about women, without taking too much, I hope. And that's why, like, when we talk about it, it's like it happens sort of within the Riot Girl scene, but I wasn't trying to like make this is the Riot Girl book. Like, this is the only one. Like, I hope my hope would be that there'd be more, especially by women. More stories from this time, because there's plenty of stories. So I worked with my editors, who are both women, and then my wife always reads everything I do first. And so, I very sensitive, and tried to be just as respectful and honest as possible. And so far, we've had a bunch of reviews come in, and people seem to be, really, really into it, and seeing what we were trying to do. And so that, that makes me feel good. If anyone was like, hey, what's up, man? What's this guy writing this story? I'd be like, okay, right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, anything someone would have to say, I mean, I would listen to, and try to hear what they're saying, and take into whatever I do next. But yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing, because I don't want to just write stories about just like white dudes, and I don't think, but at the same time, I don't want to take up space that's not mine.
Yeah.
And so it's tough, and I sort of, I don't know. I'd rather be, I don't know. I'd rather fail trying to do the right thing, I guess, than, So anyway, so I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive to that critique, and yeah, I mean, it was all done with as much respect and care as we could do, and So we'll I guess we'll see what the verdict ultimately is. But so far, they really seem to be enjoying it, and yeah.
Outside of this book, is there anything else that you're working on, or anything else that you kind of are, juggling in your head that you would like to do in the future?
Well, yeah, I did another comic that's been collected called the Auteur, that's about this sort of berserk Hollywood movie producer, and we sold that to be a TV show. So I've been working on that right now. Taika Waititi is writing on it and directing some episodes, and Jude Law is going to play Nathan Rex, the Auteur, and it's going to be on Showtime. I mean, pandemics happened, so sort of monkeyed the schedule a wee bit, but that's been real exciting. That's been something I've been working on. I mentioned, wanting to go to film school. I did end up going to film school, not in New York, but here in Virginia at Virginia Commonwealth University. and so, you know, doing film and doing television is something that I've been working towards as well. So it's sort of exciting to be doing that. And then I'm trying to write new stuff, but it's hard right now. I mean, to keep your mind clean and focused is tough with so many things going on right now that sort of crush my ability to be calm and to think clearly. I mean, it's just a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress and worry. And I mean, you know, it's funny, like I'll call my friends or we'll Zoom or something and everyone's like, how you doing? And everyone sort of pauses like, well, I mean, like, what do you want me to say? Like,
I know, fine? Man. You're like, it's totally is. You're like, I'm dealing with it.
Right. It's like, kind of feel like crap, man. And like I don't know when that's going to end, but you know, I'm excited and very anxious about the election, and I'll be real happy when that has resolved, and hopefully we get that guy out of there, and then and he goes, and then I feel like that'll be, you know, sort of step one, and then get this, you know, get the virus sort of, you know, dealt with, and but yeah, it's a really weird time. So I'm trying.
That's all you can do these days is try.
Oh, seriously. So, how about you? You hanging in?
I'm just doing the best that I can. You know, I work my day job from home, which I'm glad. So I wasn't without a job. Then just doing my podcasts and trying not to spend too much money on records. Like,
I know that one.
like my record buying habit this summer has been like it's been kind of crazy, and sometimes I gotta be like, all right, chill, man, chill. Because I keep on like because of like this podcast and then my Detroit music podcast, I keep on doing like more research on things that I never came across. So I'm like finding new stuff, like, and I'm like, oh, all right. So like buying records has been like my calm of like the pandemic.
I know. It's like I was like, wait a minute, retail therapy's not covered by the insurance?
Oh my goodness. I wish I could get a rebate for that, man. Whew.
I know.
Here's all my records. Here's all my record purchases. Can I get a little bit of that money back?
I know. So good. They'll be like, we'll cover 20%. I'll be like, yes.
Like, I'd be happy with that. You're like,
I know.
I would be happy with that.
I know. See, my thing is also space. I just don't have room for anything anymore. I'm just like, oh god, where am I gonna put all this stuff? Yeah,
and I'm doing a little bit of that too. I'm like going through my collection of things, you know, records and other. I'm like, all right, what can I get rid of too? What am I not really like? Do I really need to own this? And I'm sure there's somebody out there that will appreciate it a lot more than I will.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've got I got all these like DVDs, right? And I was like, I gotta get rid of some of this stuff. I don't need Spider-Man 3 anymore, man. I'm cool. And and so I had like, it was garbage bags, like full of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And I took it we got this cool thrift store here called Diversity Thrift. And and they have like a no contact thing. You just drop it off and go. And I was like, great. And I followed them online on like Facebook or whatever. And they had a thing. It was like the next weekend. They're like, if you made any purchase at Diversity Thrift, you can get a free DVD. And I was like, I think that's me. I think they were like, what are we going to do with all these DVDs that nobody wants? You know? And they're like, we'll just give them away. If you buy something, you can pick one out. I was like, oh, I broke the thrift store. That's not good.
Well, I mean, all right, that's cool. I mean, at least, you know, they might get a good home.
Yeah, I mean, I hope. I mean, it was pretty good stuff. I just, you know, I don't know why I have all this stuff, and I got a lot of comics too. Boy.
Right. All right, man. It's been good talking with you, man. You know, I dig, you know, My Riot. Where can people go online to get more information about what you're up to and about the new graphic novel?
if you have a local bookstore or comic book store, that's like a great place. They can always order it at, comic book stores. You can order this Diamond catalog, and Oni
Yep.
Press is the publisher. But it's also available, at Amazon, of course, and through the publisher, Oni Press. They have a sales thing on their website. So yeah, the book comes out in October, and I hope people check it out. I hope they like it.
Thank you for listening to the Fresh is the Word podcast, hosted and produced by myself, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier, empowered by Anchor at anchor.fm/Fresh is the Word. Fresh is the Word theme music provided by Steve O. You can find more of his productions at iamsteveo.bandcamp.com, and that's EYEAMSTEVEO.bandcamp.com. Fresh is the Word is available on all major streaming platforms. Please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. If you want to support Fresh is the Word, please consider pledging via Patreon at patreon.com/freshisthe word. Follow Fresh is the Word on social media on Twitter at Fresh is the Pod, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Fresh is the Word. For more information about Fresh is the Word and our other podcasts, Breaking Records and Renaissance Soul, and a collection of pop culture articles and reviews, please visit freshithepodcast.com. Thank you for listening and your support. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.